What's going on, family? It is your favorite here, Pastor Ty, and once again, we're back with a word, and this is going to bless you in an amazing way. With everything going on in the world, I got a message entitled today, When All Hell Breaks Loose. I think God has something to say, and I think either you need to be in the place or you need to be connected to us. So I'll see you on the other side, when all hell breaks loose. Peace.
Psalm 27. Notice it's Psalm 27, not Psalms 27. I'm telling you, if I hear any of y'all talking about Psalms 27, I'm going to throw this microphone at you. It's Psalm 27. Psalm 27. When you find it, could you please stand in honor of the reading of the Word of God? Psalm 27. Reading from the Christian Standard Bible, reads of this wise: the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom should I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Whom should I dread? When evildoers come against me to devour my flesh, my foes and my enemies, they stumbled and fell. Though an army deploys against me, my heart will not be afraid. Though war breaks out against me, I will still be confident. Why have asked one thing from the Lord? It is what I desire, to dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, gazing on the beauty of the Lord and seeking him in his temple. For he will conceal me in his shelter. In the day of adversity, he will hide me under the cover of his tent. He will set me high upon a rock. Then my head will be high above my enemies around me. I will offer sacrifices in his tent with shouts of joy. I will sing and make music to the Lord. One more thing before you sit down. I want to read verse 3 from the Message translation. It reads of this wise. It sounds like this. It says, when besieged, I'm calm as a baby. When all hell breaks loose, I'm collected and cool. That's what I want to talk about today. When all hell breaks loose. When all hell breaks loose. I gotta admit to you all that I'm probably more of a nerd than what you probably realize. I really enjoy my personal alone time, probably being in the house and probably reading a book or watching some type of documentary. One of my favorite genre of documentaries is anything pertaining to animals. I find animals fascinating. I find animals fascinating for a number of different reasons, in part because some of these animals remind me a lot of ourselves. It's always something interesting to me as we watch animals go in and to and fro about their own daily lives. So much to learn from the lives of animals. I was shocked to discover that I learned something not from a lion, not from a bear, not from a gorilla, no, a hippopotamus. It was from a lobster. You see, lobsters have a very complex community hierarchy. And lobsters are very curious animals and always attempting to explore new territory. And whenever one lobster encounters another, there's an instantaneous conflict that almost arises. And so that lobster will begin to dance around like a boxer, opening and raising and moving forward and backward and side to side. And there are times wherein that one lobster looks at the other size of the other lobster and says, this ain't a fight that I want to be dealing with. And they'll run away. But if both lobsters resolve to stay in the fight, there are a couple levels of conflict that they then begin to go into. You see, the first level is that lobster will give off a chemical that will convince a less healthy or aggressive lobster that this isn't somebody you want to be playing around with. You better go and mind your own business. But if that doesn't work, then they enter into the second level of conflict. With its antenna and claws folded downward, that lobster will charge at the other lobster, hoping that the lobster will retreat. But if it doesn't, they engage in this shadow boxing format. If that doesn't work, then they get to level 3. And then on level 3, each lobster tries to flip the other on its back. A lobster that is flipped will reason that if I've been flipped on my back, this is probably not somebody I need to be bothering with. But then if that doesn't work, they then escalate to level 4. With its claws open, that lobster will attempt to grab a leg, an antenna, or anything exposed. And when the dust and the water finally settles, ultimately, if that lobster is successful, he will tear the limbs away from the other lobster. And when that happens, that lobster will lay there at the bottom of the ocean. And ultimately what happens is that the lobster's brain will dissolve. And then after the brain dissolves, it then grows a new brain. But its new brain is interesting because it's a subordinate brain. It's one that is appropriate for the lobster in light of the loss that it just suffered from. The lobster never lives the same way again. That actually there are chemicals that the brain is saturated with, a chemical called octopamine, which forces a defeated looking lobster, scrunched up, inhibited looking, and one that vanishes at the first sign of trouble. I know y'all saying, what does this have to do with anything? It reminds me of an interesting, complex thinker by the name of Dr. Jordan Peterson. He has a book entitled The 12 Rules for Life. And he says that if you're going to conquer life, the first rule of life is that you got to learn how to stand up straight with your shoulders back. You see, Peterson further expounds a bit of what this means. He says to stand up straight with your shoulders back is to accept the terrible responsibility of life with your eyes wide open. You see, Peterson is communicating something very important because he believes that if we are going to deal with the chaos of life, a lot of our ability to deal with it is going to be in our posture. See, the reality is that many of us are like that once now defeated lobster that now finds itself with a brain that forces you now to live life as if you will always be a loser. But I came pressed through the rain today to tell somebody that you are not the last loss you suffered. And you and I know something about posture, don't we? We remember when we were growing up in school, before this present day school, grade school, you remember we used to get in trouble if your posture wasn't right. You remember you had to sit in grade school with your back to the back of the seat. You had to be sitting there straight and attentive, and you better look at least like you're paying attention. There's something about posture. Posture is vital because if one has bad posture, he or she can suffer for the rest of their lives if they have bad posture. But I got to be honest here today, there are things in life that can alter your posture. There are things, there are circumstances in life that can alter your posture. Political climate can alter your posture. When I look at the world and everything that is going on, it was interesting that we just saw the gifting or the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize. It was interesting to me while we watch this one individual receive the Nobel Peace Prize, and y'all's president sent word from the White House and said it was a shame that he did not receive the Nobel Peace Prize because he felt like he has been orchestrating peace since he's been in the office. But hold on, brother president, because when I look at the world, I'm trying to figure out what peace are you speaking of? I mean, are you saying peace when since your administration has come to be some 300 316,000 black women have found themselves unemployed. I mean, what peace are you talking about, Brother President? I mean, when you say peace, what are you talking about? Are you talking about the peace that those after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, those that were on HBCU campuses found themselves having to be on lockdown, not because they had anything to do with anything. It was just folk mad at the fact that they had the nerve and the audacity to say, I'm black and I'm proud. What peace are you talking about, Brother President, when we have in Chicago alone ICE agents roaming to and fro, literally going inside of hospitals and taking sick and wounded and vulnerable people away and stripping them away from their families and courting them across the board? I mean, what peace are you talking about, Brother President? It seems that sometimes political climates can alter our posture, but I gotta also be honest and come down your street. Sometimes people can alter your posture. Let's be honest here today. There are people in your life that get on your nerves and they can alter your posture. They don't even have to be in the room, but when you hear their name, I mean, it just does something to your spirit. It'll make you mess up the whole rest of your day, not because you come in contact with them, but just at the fact when you just think about what they said about you, when you just think about how you gave them everything only to not get anything back in reciprocity. People have a way of altering our posture, but then also your past can alter your posture. Can I be honest here today? As your pastor, I can tell y'all, some of us need to be delivered from ourselves. Some of us need to be delivered and forgiven, not by anybody else, but we need to learn to forgive ourselves for what we did on yesterday. Who am I talking to in the room that can say, yeah, Rev, I really got a testimony that there's some things I did before, there were some things I've done that I'm not always all the way happy about, but that's who I used to be, and God has been working on me, and I came today to tell you, don't you allow your past to alter who God is trying to make you in the present. Don't you allow what you did yesterday to alter the posture of what God is trying to get you to today. And I get it. Somebody is saying it has something to say, but because what does this have to do anything with Psalm 27? I know somebody saying, Rev, you've been doing all that talking and I got brunch after this. What are you trying to get to pertaining specifically to posture? It's interesting. Then when we come to Psalm 27, we meet our old friend by the name of David. David, friends, David says, he said, I had people that were trying to kill me. I had adversaries and foes coming from everywhere. Armies were encamping against me. And check out what David says. David says, when I'm besieged, I'm calm as a baby. When all hell breaks loose, I'm collected and cool. David says, hold on. He says, when the political climate is going crazy, he said, I ain't worried. He said, I'm collected and cool. He says, when people are talking bad about me, he said, I ain't worried about that either. He said, I'm collected and cool. He says, when my past is still reaching and clinging to me because of what I did on yesterday, David said, I ain't worried about that either because I'm collected and cool. You see, David teaches us something about posture, doesn't he? He said it admits to the fact that hell is present, but I'm still cool. Problems are present, but I'm still cool. Adversaries are near, but I'm still cool. And perhaps David is trying to get you and I to understand that you can be cool too. Why don't you nudge your neighbor that ain't said nothing to me all service long and say, neighbor, you can keep your cool. You ain't got to go and get them back. You ain't got to go and write them a response back. You ain't got to text them back after what they did. No, you can learn how to keep your cool. You can keep your cool. When hell is present, you can keep you're cool. Can I give y'all the reasons? Can I give you the remedy as to how you can stay cool even when hell is present? Check this out. You can stay cool when your focus is on who is above you rather than who is around you. That sounds so good. I'm going to try it one more time. I said, you can keep you cool when your focus is on who is above you rather than who is around you. You see, Psalm 27 is one of those he and me psalms that it seeks to show the intense relationship between the writer of the psalm and the God that the writer serves. It's important to know who writes Psalm 27. The psalm is attributed to David, and we know about David, don't we, friends, that David is the one that will be anointed by the prophet Samuel in the pastures of Bethlehem, although being forgotten by his father. It's David who pens this song. But an even more important question, friends, is not who wrote the song. An even more important question is, when did David write the song? You see, scholars suggest that this is not written by David, the shepherd boy, but rather this particular psalm was composed by David, the king of Israel. And look closely to what he says in verse 3. He says, yet I will still be confident. Yet I still will be confident. He spends a significant amount of ink of his pen talking about his enemies, but he says, I'm still cool. And we all know something about confidence, don't we? You and I gain confidence from a number of different areas. Some of y'all are confident due to experience. It's nothing like being confident because you have already been there before. Or some of us are confident because we got resources. I mean, you got $5 to $10 in the bank, and you know how to get whatever you need. There's something about drawing confidence from our experience and our resources, and you have all of that what you need in order to deal with any type of situation or individual. And I like it because Shepherd David did not have experience like King David did. And then also, not only did Shepherd David not have the experience that King David did, Shepherd David also did not have the resources that King David did. And he makes this statement that he is confident, but note that he is not stating confidence from experience or resources, that which he already has, but rather his confidence comes from his association. This teaches us something very important, that we should never place our confidence in our experience nor our resources, because it's only our confidence in God that is sustainable and strong enough to help us withstand the hell that you and I may be facing. And the reason why some of y'all didn't move is because maybe you ain't had nobody stab you in the back. Maybe you ain't never lost your job before. Maybe you ain't never had people that promised they were going to pay you back and they never paid you back. And David said, listen, I got to be honest, my confidence wasn't in that in the first place. And the reason I can still be confident in that is the fact that my confidence is focused on who is above me rather than who is around me. But who is he confident in? Preachers, the psalm begins with the Lord. The name of this covenant-keeping God of Israel, the God who would deliver them out of Egypt into the promised land. It is that God that expounds upon within personal relationships. He says, the Lord is my light. Can we chop this up for a bit? Can I chop this up for you? He says, the Lord is my light. The term light comes from Numbers chapter 6, verse 24 through 25, when Moses is instructed by God on how to bless the people. Aaron would say, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and to be gracious to you. Notice what David is doing at the beginning of the psalm. David at the beginning of the psalm is declaring what you and I do at the end of worship services. You know, when we're about to leave and the preacher or the pastor gives you the blessing or the benediction, David begins this psalm with a blessing or a benediction. But it's a very important image because the blessing states that the Lord's face is to shine upon you. What you have to understand is in biblical times, whenever God's face was turned toward an individual, it was a sign of God's divine favor resting on God's people. When God's face is toward you, that's a sign of his favor. But when God turns his face away from you, that's a sign of God's judgment. David says, he begins this passage saying, the Lord is my light. I've got the favor of God on me. His face is turned toward me. But he doesn't end there. He said, the Lord is my light and my salvation. You see, the word there, salvation, it literally means in the Hebrew to deliver or to rescue out of trouble. Essentially, it almost appears to show the image of one who is being attacked but is rescued or delivered from the predator. He says, not only is God's face turned toward me, he said his hands are fighting for me. But he continues, he said, the Lord is my light and my salvation, and raises a rhetorical question, whom shall I fear? He said, but not only that, he said, the Lord is the strength or the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? God is my strength or my stronghold. What does that mean? You see, in cities at this time, they would build walls around the city as a means of defense against foreign invaders. However, if an enemy was able to penetrate the walls, then the people, they would run to the fortress or the stronghold. It was the place you run to when you had no other result. And it was always out of the reach of the enemy. You see, y'all missed it. I said the stronghold or the fortress was the place that when the enemy penetrated the walls, the people would then run to the fortress or the stronghold, because although the fortress and the stronghold they were still able to get there, it was too high up for their enemies to reach. Notice what David says. David describes a God whose face is toward him, a God whose hands are always fighting for him, but then also a God whose arms he could always run to. And with that knowledge, he says, I got a question. When I know God's fighting for me, when I know I can always run to him, when I know he turns his face toward me, he said, who in the world do I have to fear? He said, of whom shall I even be afraid? He even goes so far to say that my enemies are going to stumble and fall. Sometimes the reality is that you and I, we struggle in life not because we can't see our enemies, but perhaps you don't know who your God is. You see, I like it. You see, I like this passage. I like it because it teaches us concerning our theology about enemies. Not our theology about God, but our theology about our enemies. And let me tell you, this ain't the first time David talks like this, is it? No, it's in the first time that he speaks like this in light of his enemies. Y'all remember that Psalm 23? The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul, leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Now that he did all that talking about God, then he talks about his enemies in verse 4. He says, even though, yea, though I go through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear. Why? Because you are with me. Maybe David is teaching us something about our theology about enemies. Maybe David is teaching us something about our perspective about enemies, because David said, listen, the reality is, after understanding who God is, we can then make the decision that we ain't got to be fearful. Perhaps the reason many of us have gotten our enemies wrong is because you got God wrong. And until you learn how to put God in God's rightful place, you always gonna be pacing the floor at night. You always gonna be crying crying yourself to sleep at night. You always going to be going crazy and losing your mind because obviously you don't understand the formula that David is saying. David is saying it ain't enemies first and God second. David said it's God first and then enemies second. And whenever I know how to prioritize my God, my enemies look a whole lot differently. Whenever I know how to prioritize my God, an empty bank account look a whole lot differently. Whenever I know how to prioritize my God, a wayward child looks a whole lot differently. Whenever I know how to prioritize my God, a bad diagnosis looks a whole lot differently. Whenever I know how to prioritize my God, my dreams, my ambitions, and everything God is calling me to looks a whole lot differently. I got a question, FIPC. Do you know who your God is? I just got back to Arizona, and when I got back to Arizona, I flew from the East Coast. From DC, Baltimore, and I flew all the way here to be here just last week. And and I was on that plane, and I was thinking, I said, here I am, thousands of feet in the air. I couldn't help but wonder. I said, anything in the world could happen to me. Anything in the world could happen to me, and ain't nothing nobody could do. It was just nothing anybody could do. And here I am, flying these thousands of feet in the air, and I couldn't help but wonder, what is the science behind planes? What is the science behind why a plane can begin in DC and make it to Phoenix, Arizona in 4.5 hours? You see, what you have to understand is that there's a difference between engines and wings. Hear me. Engines move the plane forward. Engines move the plane forward, and the wind that meets the plane is pushed down towards the ground. You see, the engines move the plane forward, but it's the wings that are responsible for the lift of the plane. You see, the wings of the airplane change the resistant pressured winds that are coming its way as a result of the engine pushing it forward. The wings take the pressure and take the resistance that are coming full frontal to their face and allow that wind to be pushed down in order to lift the plane and everybody on the plane to where they need to go. And I said, wait a minute, maybe all of us need to take a lesson from the wing of an airplane. You see, because all of us are going to be faced with some inevitable resistant winds. But maybe the problem here is the whole ride for 4.5 hours, that wing was meeting a whole lot of resistant winds. That wing was meeting a whole lot of trouble. It was meeting a whole lot of opposition, but the whole time I was flying, I never heard the wing complaining about the wind. I never heard the wing complaining that somebody didn't call their name. I never heard the wing complaining that somebody didn't share their post. I never heard the wing complaining that somebody didn't call them when they got home. No, the wing just kept taking the wind. It just kept taking the pressure. It just kept taking the opposition and said, I'm going to make the conscious decision not to allow the opposition to pull me down, but rather to lift me up. And the only reason your pastor is preaching to you on this Sunday is because on last Sunday, the wing made a decision. And I came to tell somebody here today, as we're closing out this final quarter of the year, you're going to have to make some decisions. You're going to have to make some decisions not to let certain things get to you. You're going to have to make some decisions not to allow everything to knock you off your rocker. You're going to have to learn the lesson of the wing rather than letting it pull you down. Why don't you allow it to lift you up? He says, you can stay cool When you focus on who is above you rather than who's around you, but that's not only that. He says you can stay cool when your focus is on where you are rather than who is around you. I love verse 4. One thing I have desired of the Lord, and that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. For he will hide me in the shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent. David says, there's only one thing I desire in life. There's only one thing that when I wake up in the morning that I desire in the world, he said, and that is that I may dwell in the house of the Lord. You know, part of the reason some of y'all didn't clap or say anything is because you're wondering, how is it that David means this? Is David saying we need to go and we need to get us a sleeping bag and pull up at FIBC and have a sleepover for the rest of the week? Does he mean that we all need to come down here at the altar and lay our beds out and all of us sleep around the altar? Let's not be silly, friends. David is speaking here of a consistent and continual communion with God. His mind is that no matter where I am, my decisions are governed by my longing to be in communication and in communion with God. For David, David seemed to have a different take on secular and sacred spaces. David seems to have a different take on what it means to be secular and sacred. And the only reason this is important is because many of us in church have a warped theology on what is sacred and what is secular. Yo, okay. You don't move because maybe I'm talking to the folk that grew up in church your whole life. You remember back in the day, it was considered secular and sinful to do things like whistling in the house and playing cards in the house. It was considered secular and sinful for you to even go to the movies. And then we got even further, and then it became secular and sinful when you and I started having company around certain individuals. Remember, you had to guard yourself against certain type of people and certain ideologies. And maybe that's the problem, because you don't understand what it means to be in the world and not of the world. You ain't got to be mean all the time. You mean to tell me you ain't got enough Holy Ghost to be able to go somewhere and not be infected or not to be affected by somebody else? Ain't that what Jesus did? Everywhere Jesus shows up in the Bible, Jesus wasn't changed by them. No, because he had so much power. Whenever Jesus showed up, the whole world changed as a result of his power. Why you always try and think that you are infected? If you're a child of God, you should be doing the infecting.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
So one way to read this passage is one thing that I have desired in the gym, one day that I have desired at my house, one thing that I have desired while I'm driving, one thing that I have desired while I'm on the phone, one thing that I have desired at the movies, one thing that I have desired in the mall, one thing that I have desired is that I may dwell no matter where I am in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. David said, I don't care what's going on in my life. Lord, just don't separate me from your presence. Lord, don't ever take your spirit away from me. Lord, don't ever let me go somewhere and not feel that you're there. You know, I ain't talking to everybody now. I'm talking to the adult Christians right through here. I'm talking about with the people that believe you got the power of God on the inside of you, that know what it feels like to be in the will of God, that know what it feels like to be away from God. And I tell you, that's why David said, Lord, I don't care what happens, just don't take your presence away from me. Whatever. I want to be in the presence of God.
He said, but I want to be in the presence of God. He says, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. I want to be in consistent, continual communion with God. To adore God, but then also to interrogate God. And look at what he says. Look at what he said. Look close to what he says. He says you can stay cool. He said I want to adore God. I want to adore God. I want to look up. I want to praise God. This is what we just did for this whole service. We were lifting, blessing the name of the Lord. That's what we were doing. We were praising God. But then he says also, not only do I can just look up and praise the graciousness and glorious and grandeur of God. He said, God, I also got some questions. You know why sometimes you can stay cool? Because God listens to your questions. Yeah. Hold on. Because I know some of you grew up in church, and growing up in church or growing around people, and they told you, you don't question God. And I know what they meant, but that ain't biblical. So much so that your Savior even had questions for God. Your Savior even said, Lord, can this cup pass from me? Even Paul said, I got questions. God, will you take the thorn away? And God says, no. I want to tell you, friends, I want to tell you, family, that God listens to your questions. And maybe that's what worship is really about. Worship is really about having space for adoration and interrogation. Sometimes I come to church, I don't feel like lifting up my hands. Sometimes I come to church, I don't want to sing. Sometimes I come to church, I want to sit there and y'all go on and do whatever y'all want to do. Why? Because God, I got questions. And maybe some of us need to be more kind to the people. They may not be sitting down because they got a problem. No, they got questions that they wrestling with God about. Sometimes God listens to our questions, and because that's what happens when you are in constant communion with God. For he will hide me in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will lift me high upon the rock. He says that he will hide me in the shelter. That this is interesting here because some scholars would suggest that this would have been sung, this psalm would have been sung during a ceremony at the temple. And so David says that he will hide me in his shelter. Here's the problem. He says this would have been sung at that specific time, but at the time of the writing of the text, preachers, at the time of the writing of the text, the temple had not been built. So the question then must be raised, if David, what are you exactly speaking of? It seems to suggest that David is actually speaking of the presence of God being that of the Ark of the Tabernacle. And I don't know about y'all, but a couple of weeks ago, there was a guy up here that came and preached. He had long locks and stood up here with a black shirt, and he preached a sermon called "A Box That Preaches." And he talked to you a little bit about that box because that box was called the Ark of the Covenant. It was covered on all sides with gold. And on the inside, it had a golden urn that held manna, an Aaron's staff that budded, and the tablets of the covenant or testimony. And above it were cherubims of glory overshadowing the mercy seat. And the ark was a personification of the very presence of God. That here it is. David says that it was the tangible sign. It was the tangible sign of the invisible presence of God. And David says, here is where I want to be. And David knew about the ark. Because one day when he was transporting the ark, Uzzah reaches out his hand to touch the ark because it stumbles, and while it was stumbling and slipping, he reaches out his hand and touches it, and the Bible says that Uzzah is struck dead. Why? Because you don't play with the holiness of God. It was so much power. It was so much power that it was so much power David knew about just being in the presence of God. But notice what he says, he will lift me high upon a rock. He continues, my head shall be lifted up. I get it, because some of us have an issue with worship, because here I am in the temple. My head is lifted up. I've been lifted up high on the rock. And all that is great, isn't it? But look closely, because some of you have made the mistake to believe that adoration of God and interrogation of God would lead to the elimination of your enemies. Oh, but God does not always operate in this manner. You see, while all of this is happening to David and happening for David, his enemies are still present. You see, God doesn't always operate in this manner, because he will allow your enemies to remain present. Because when we worship, God is our audience. But when he exalts us, our enemies become our audience. Because that's why David says in Psalm 23 that he prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And I came to give you this line here. You can learn to out-worship your hell, because when all hell breaks loose, you can always still get close to heaven. This is a word for every person that ever enters a sanctuary or watches online. You ought to come to worship with worship on your mind, not who is driving what, not is sleeping with who, not who is doing what, but I'm facing too much hell in my life to be worried about what's going on the outside, because as long as I can worship, that still means there's possibility. As long as I can worship, that means victory can still happen. As long as I can worship, there's still a possibility that God can turn this thing around. Why don't we have about 5 to 10 seconds in this place of real worshipers in here that can take about 5 to 10 seconds of praise and give God the best worship that you have? Because sometimes things happen when you worship. I've been up much too long. I've been up longer than I would have liked to be. This is my last movement here. You can say cool, finally. You can say cool when your voice is redirected. I've been lifted high above the rock. I've been lifted high above this elevation. But then he says, and I will offer in his tent sacrifices with shouts of joy. I will sing and make melody to the Lord. You know, this psalm, our pericope ends here, and I will offer in his tent sacrifices with shouts of joy. I will sing, make melody. Scholars will tell you that these are the songs and shouts of victory. You know, listen to the verbiage of David all throughout the psalm. He says, whom shall I fear? Whom shall I be afraid? They gonna stumble and fall. My heart shall not fear. I'm gonna still be confident. You know, this is all strange verbiage, especially when you consider the fact that the enemy is still present. But David is demonstrating the verbiage of a victor rather than a victim. Okay, yeah, I got it. Y'all didn't move, but here's why. Y'all didn't move, but it's cool, because some of y'all remember in grade school, that was a little book. All of us read it. It was a little small book, and it was called The Little Engine That Could. Y'all remember The Little Engine That Could? It's the story that begins with a little boy having a dream that a birthday train was coming to town. His sister tries to persuade him not to believe, and the little boy responds, I know it will. I know it will. I know it will. And they are open and they are then looking for a train because they need a train to carry the toys over the mountain and into the city. And you remember there's this red train by the name of Georgia. Georgia is selected, but while Georgia is on her way, Georgia breaks down. They ask her for help, and then other trains can't do it. They can't carry the toys for various reasons. And then there is little blue Tilly. You remember Tilly is that little blue engine, and she is the one for the job. Tilly heads over the mountain with the toys attached, but the closer she gets to the mountain, it gets darker. A wolf on the mountain tells her to turn around, but she responds, I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. She keeps going, and an eagle lands on her and says, turn around. You cannot handle the storm. And Tilly responds and says, I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. An avalanche comes and temporarily stops Tilly in her tracks, but Tilly breaks out of the avalanche and the snow. And when she breaks out, she says, I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. And they eventually make it back to the city and make it back to the city with the toys. And I said, listen to the testimony of Tilly. Tilly said, it may be dark, but I think I can. It may be storming, but I think I can. Others might say that I can't, but I think I can. What you say doesn't have to match what surrounds you. What you say doesn't have to match your setting. Who am I talking to in the building? They thought you were going to go crazy after everything you've gone through, after losing the people you lost, and you just keep waking up saying, I think I can. I think I can. Hold on, wait a minute. Let me remix that for a minute, because I'm a child of Jesus Christ, and I ain't got to go off what I think I can do. I get to go off what I know I can do. So that's why I wake up in the morning saying, I know I can. I know I can. I know I can. That's why I came to church today to shout, I know I can. I know I can. I know I can. That's why I'm still going to apply. Why? Because I know I can. I know I can. I know I can. Is there anybody in here that can give God praise? Because you know what? Whatever I say, it don't have to match what I'm going through, because I know that I can. What you say doesn't have to match your surroundings. But how? I'm done. How? How am I able to sing? Because hear me, he says, I will sing and make melody to the Lord. He says, hear me, he's speaking of being inside of a tent. But hear me, practically, tents are no match for swords. Tents are no match for spears. But if you read down to verse 13, he says, I believe that I shall look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. All right. How can I sing? How can you continue to sing even though your song does not match what surrounds you? I'm glad. Y'all, I got it. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, I love it. Y'all ask the best questions. Y'all ask the best questions. Listen, y'all ask the best questions. I love WWE. I love wrestling. I will watch wrestling all day long. I love Stone Cold. I love The Rock. I love the NWO. I love all of it. I remember growing up always watching wrestling, whether it was WCW or it was WWF at the time. You remember, I love the Attitude Era. Some of us remember we grew up on the Attitude Era, and you know something about this. But you know, ultimately, as time goes on, you and we learn something about wrestling, don't we? Because when you were a child, you start to notice some things. You know, they do an elbow drop but didn't hit them for real. You know, you trying to figure out what in the world is going on. Well, you all know that there has been a partnership between WWE and MMA. And you know, the owner of MMA is the chairman or the chief is a guy by the name of Dana White. Dana White a couple of years ago made a comment about wrestling that messed me up. He made me mad. I couldn't understand why he would even get on TV and even make these type of statements. Dana White, the head of MMA said that wrestling is fake. He said wrestling ain't real. It's fake. That nobody wants to watch wrestling because wrestling is fake. But then a couple of days later, Stone Cold was on a podcast. And you know, I love Stone Cold. Ain't nothing like when that glass shatters and Stone Cold would come down that ramp. Stone Cold responded to Dana White and said, it's not that wrestling is fake. He said wrestling is just always predetermined. I see y'all missed it. He said it ain't that it's fake. He said it's just the fact that every time before we leave the back, we already know who's going to win the match. He said before we get down and before the bell rings, we already know who's going to win. That's all I came today to tell somebody at FIBC. Why can you keep on singing? It's because I understand that I know that the battle is already predetermined. I'm already in the midst of a fixed fight that I ain't got to worry about what I'm going through because on the other end, God is already going to have me be the victor. Am I talking to victors in the room today? Am I talking to victorious people? If you know that you are a winner, if you already know that the fight is fixed, why don't you turn to a neighbor and say, neighbor, I want to let you know that you already won. I know the battle ain't started yet. I know everything ain't got started, but you already won. I know you still trying to figure it out, but you already won. Why don't you turn to another neighbor and I need you to look at that neighbor in the eye and look them square in the face like you want to put your hands on them and say, neighbor, when you leave this place, I want to speak over your life. Say, neighbor, you are a winner. You are a winner. And if you believe it today, lift your hands in this sanctuary and shout yes. Shout yeah. Shout yeah. All over the building we're standing. You are a winner. Some of us, your setting says one thing. Your circumstances. Listen, here it is. It's interesting. It's interesting. David has to sing. I will sing of the goodness of God. It's interesting that even though David says I sing, let's be honest, sometimes our circumstances have songs too. Let's be honest, some of you are still rehearsing songs from what people told you in your past. Some of you are. But guess what? You don't have to rehearse the songs that other people give you.
Family, thank you so much for tuning in and joining in with us, whether you're on the treadmill or whether you listen in the car, wherever you are. I really, really appreciate it. As you know, we are embarking on this season, Finish Strong. It is our church, as we're dedicating the final quarter of this year, to dedicate ourselves, to consecrate ourselves in anticipation for what God is going to do in the year 2026. And I want you to be a part. So there'll be a link in the description and you can join and sign up with us because we got some amazing things in store. Let's finish strong, because guess what? When all hell breaks loose, we can still be calm, cool, and collected. I love you. I'll see you next time.